Garrett Blevins here with video number 2 of the JTS onboarding program for the AI coaching. In the last video we covered the MRV overview as well as how to send back your log and how to save it and use Google Sheets. So if you haven't watched that already, make sure to watch that. One thing I'll mention again is whenever you are using your sheet, make sure you go, if you're in the, if you'll start in the home tab, but go to the formulas tab, just check your calculation options, make sure it's set to automatic. That'll make sure all the real-time adjustments are going to be functioning properly and you won't have to click calculate now every time you make an adjustment. So jumping right in, we're going to go to cycle 1, and your cycle will look different than this. It will not look the same. There'll be similarities, and I'll cover those, but basically this program is going to create unique outputs, millions and millions of unique outputs for different people. It's not a template. It's something that is going to be unique to you and is going to grow based off of your feedback. And so I'm going to show you some of the broad strokes of what you may or may not see in your program. But again, don't be thrown off if yours looks different. Especially, this is what it created for Marissa Inda, a very advanced multi-time world and national champion. So hers may be a little bit different from yours, but there's going to be the same sorts of pieces. So starting here, it's always good to make sure that your meet date is correct and that hasn't been altered in some way, shape, or form. If it ever is, or if there's a question about it, you can always email back to the system and customer service will get you a response on that. You'll also see here your squat, bench, and deadlift and the weight which you are using. You can change the weight. That should be calculated automatically. It's going to be linked to your initial questionnaire, but you are able to go back and forth in case you're using a new gym or you buy new equipment. And so that's something you can edit in the end of block check-ins. And we'll talk more about those at the end of this video. Next, you're going to see this pre-workout fatigue level. There's a recommendation here to fill this out after 2 warm-up sets, but you could also fill it out, right before your top set, at your top set, after your top set, or before you work out. It's up to you, but the goal of this is to answer these questions. And so you see here for level 1, it means no or low fatigue and soreness. You feel fresh and excited to work out this movement. This goes all the way down to number 5, which is extreme fatigue and soreness. You have no motivation to work out this movement, and you are almost unable to perform the workout or are failing to do all sets. And what this refers to is every day we ask about your squat, bench, and deadlift, and we're asking about how much fatigue and soreness do you have, how fresh do you feel, and how psychologically motivated are you. And so you're going to pick the number that correlates most closely to that experience. Sometimes you may be fatigued and sore but have high motivation, and so you kind of got to just kind of split the difference and put the best number you can in here. You'll notice we have low bar here. The A refers to it being the primary low bar movement, wide grip bench, and then some biceps, band press downs, lat pull downs, and barbell overhead extensions. You'll see there's no deadlift movement listed here, but we still want you to fill out the deadlift number as though there was a deadlift movement here for this day. And so basically you're going to be rating your back and hamstring soreness as well as your motivation if you did have a deadlift workout this week. And so always fill out all 3, no matter if you have an actual exercise that would hit those areas. This is going to be true for variations as well. So if this is wide grip bench or Spoto press, that's kind of what you're going to be looking at when you see if are you motivated or unmotivated towards that movement when you fill out the bench. Likewise, if this was front squat or something else. So you're looking for the same or similar movements when you're dictating those. You'll also see this injured protocol, and one of the great benefits, there'll be a standalone video on this as well, is that there are injury recovery protocols. And while I'm not going to get into those in detail now, it'll be in a separate video. This is an option where it will actually, if you go in here and as you're selecting either 1 to 5, you can also select injured now or rehab week 1 through 6. And what this is you use the injured now if you happen to be injured during training. This will remove any of the movements that are associated with that. So you'll see I selected injured now for squat. It removes the squats. Now, if you've been cleared by a doctor and you feel confident that you can begin training again, you can start the rehab protocols. And if you select that, it will start putting in rehab protocols for you. Anyways, I'll go more in depth on that and how to go through those and what to look for later on. But just know that there are injury recovery protocols, and there's a separate video that covers that in the playlist. In any case, moving on, let me zoom out here just a little bit, and you can see that this is week 1 week 2, week 3, and week 4 of the 4 weeks that are given here. Training is always sent out in 4-week blocks, but that doesn't mean that this is the end of the block. It simply means that this is the end of the 4 weeks that you've been given. Likewise, you'll see horizontally here, day 1 of each week is here, day 2, and so on. Depending on how many days per week you selected, you'll have more or less exercises on a variety of different days, and that may look a little different in your sheets. This is a 3-day per week program. You'll see here, we already talked a little bit about the fatigue level, but you'll be using those for each day. And then you have the exercises listed here, and then the sets and the reps, the target intensity, the weight, and then the actual intensity. There's a lot going on here, and so it can be overwhelming at first, but trust me, you'll get used to how you view and look at these programs. What's important is that you can delete and type over anything that is red and in italics. So you see here that 205 to 220 is in red and italics. This is what one of the intensity styles, and it is a range of weight, obviously, because it's 62 to 67%. The earlier you are in a training block or in a progression, the more you're going to want to lean maybe a little towards the lower end of these. It doesn't have to be that way, but it's often good to undershoot and build up when you're earlier in a cycle or in a training block than it is to try to really go hard early, because then you don't have anywhere to go afterwards. And so you can see here that this is transition week 1 of 2, and then into transition 2 of 2, and then it goes strength 1 of 5, strength 2 of 5, and it's building into this strength block. That's what the transition block is for. So you know here, if you've got 5 weeks of strength blocks and 2 weeks of transition block, there'll be a deload on the 5th week of the strength block, but that's 4 weeks, 5, that's 6 weeks of progressive overloading. So you might want to start at more the lower end of this range. As I said, you can type over this. You can. There's this giant formula in there. If you are curious, you can look at that and all the wonderful things that go on there. But what you can do is you don't need to have that there as a formula anymore. It's in red and italics, and you're going to write over that. So you're going to type in, let's say you use 205, and you type 205 in there. You'll notice it's no longer red and in italics. It told you the actual intensity. It was a 62 to 70% range. We used the lowest amount. It came up with 62%, not a surprise. And then you have the back off set listed here. So you're doing 1 set of 4 at this top weight, and then you're going to do 4 sets of 4, or whatever it happens to say, for the back off work. And you can see that the actual intensity there is 56%. In fact, it's 56.2%. Note that if you are entering high or low fatigue, let's say you put in a 1, it's not going to be 185 anymore. If you're feeling really recovered, the system's going to push you a little bit more, and so there may be less of a drop. Conversely, if you're feeling really fatigued and beat up, it may give you a larger drop if you're rating in higher fatigue, and those will change depending on a number of factors, how big and small that drop is. But that's basically how a ranged intensity works. You're going to fill in the weight, and the rest is going to be automatically populated. Now, you'll see here, this is a single kind of like just repeated sets at an RPE. And this wide grip bench here, what you're going to do, you can use the same weight for all of your sets, or you can increase or decrease a little bit, kind of go up to a top set, maybe drop off a couple of pounds and then finish out. But for 3 sets at RPE 6, I would assume you probably could keep the same weight for all of the sets. Let's look. We've got a max here of 215. This is wide grip for sets up to 4. RPE 6. Let's just go with 140 as the weight. And again, the reason we're typing over this question mark is because it was red and italicized. And so as we hit enter there, we get our 140, but we still see this red italicized actual RPE. Well, that's where you type in what it actually was. And so if you did 2 sets at 6 or RPE 6, and then the third set was RPE 6.5, you could type in 6 or 6.5 here. But just know, and this is important, just type in the number for the RPE that you're using. Don't write RPE 6, just type in the number 6 or 6.5 or so on. And you'll see here that it's now gray. That's what you're going to do to track all of the movements, which are just a single RPE with sets across. Now, let's scroll down here a little bit. Look at this conventional deadlift here. You'll see it's RPE 7, but it's the same 1 set of 4 and then back off sets like we had with the range up here. And so the way that you're going to do this, you're going to follow the same thing. You're going to work up to 1 set of 4 at RPE 7. Let's say, based on a 415 deadlift, a set of 4 at that at RP7. Let's just go with 350. And again, we're typing over this because it's red and italicized, so we know we can type right over that. But note, it only filled in this box. It didn't fill in the back off work yet. That's because we have to type in the actual RPE as well. Again, it's red and italicized, and it's in this same row. And anytime you have multiple things that are red and italicized, you need to fill in both of them before the system is going to know what to do. The reason for that is, let's say that we hit the nail right on the head and we did do this at RPE 7. Well, then it's going to know what back offs to give us. But let's say we overshot by a little bit. This set of 350, we thought it was going to be an RP 7, but actually turned out to be an RP 8. Well, then it's going to decrease the amount of weight we use for back offs because we overshot our RPE. In the same way, if we did an RPE 6, it would bump it up maybe a little bit. But one of the things to note is, if you hit an RPE 6 and you should have done a 7, probably just need to increase the weight and do another set. You probably just haven't worked up to your top set yet. So more often than not, this is going to be used for when you overshoot an RPE. And so that's how you're going to populate back offsets when there is a top set at an RPE. Just make sure that you're filling in all of the red and italicized information, and that will populate the next workout. Some weeks will be dependent on the previous week, and so you'll see here, this is another RPE based exercise here on the conventional, and so you would just follow the same process here. But for certain things, you'll note there's nothing there yet. And the reason for this is it's waiting to see some of what's going on in the previous week. So once I would type in here what I did, then the next week will show up. And once I type in here, the next week will show up, and so on. Note though that just because something starts as a range doesn't mean that that continues on for all the weeks. You'll see here it goes from a range of 70 to 75 to now a top set of RPE. And so if we type in here 250, we need to do the same thing where now we're doing this actual RPE, and let's say we hit the nail on the head there and do that. So again, there's a few pieces of information that you're going to be filling out as you go through. Just make sure if it's red and italicized, you're perfectly good to type over it and take care of that. And that'll continue on all the way through. Sometimes, for example, after a workout like this, the next week may have simply 3 sets of 6 at 90% in the next week, or 80%, or I don't know, whatever the percentage would be, and it's a single percentage. In those, the weights will be populated for you. You can use those weights and just do it as is. Anything that's kind of gray and populated for you, you're basically expected to do that as written. It's the red and italicized that are going to have a little bit more leeway. In any case, that's what's going on in these sheets. You'll go through each week, and then at the end you'll go over to the next week, and so on. When you get to the fourth week in whatever block you're doing, probably at least by the Thursday of that week, somewhere, Wednesday or Thursday, maybe Friday at the latest, send your logs back to the email you got the log from. In most cases, let me pull it up here. This is going to be this JTS AI coaching team, and so it's JTS coaching at blesscoaching.com. You're going to send back, you'll just reply. You can type in a message here, but it's an automated system, but it's there for the collection of these logs. And so you'll attach after you download or whatever you're going to do with the log that you've been editing, that's got all your edits for how you've been feeling and all that sort of good stuff entered in, and that's all calculated. That's what you're going to save, attach to the email back to the system, and send back. You'll also fill out an end of block questionnaire. That end of block questionnaire will be emailed to you in a separate email when your payment pings. So 28 days from your initial payment, you'll get an email that says your payment's been processed for the next block. Here's the questionnaire. Take the questionnaire, but don't forget to send back your logs too. That's an important step, because if you only base the next block on your questionnaire, the system isn't going to know all about what you've actually been doing. And so it's important to send both those pieces of information in when you get into the last block of your training cycle. And that's the process. You just do that over and over again until you go through the training cycle. And it's just kind of like checking in with a coach, where you're working with somebody and they're checking in with you every once in a while and looking at what you're doing before it sends you the next plan, because, well, it has a plan in mind of what it wants to do. it's going to adjust that based on what's actually happening with you as a client. And while there may be 84 quadrillion starting points, those expand massively as you're actually typing in your fatigue, showing what your recovery is like, and that's going to be used to reinforce and change some of your MRV and how those calculations are made as tallies and averages are held over time. In any case, that's how it works. I'll be in with the next video. We'll show what cycle 2 looks like, and how that kind of has an interplay with cycle 1. And then the last video we're going to have in this series is how to use the Meet Week Taper tab, and also the Attempt Selection Advisor. So check those out here in just a minute.